Okay, so tonight what we're going to do is we just have a quick update as to where we kind of stand with our Conex project. The main things that I wanted to touch on, you'll notice Chris isn't here, so I'm going to do my best to get through this presentation without him here. But mainly we're just going to talk about where we went with council the last 4 study sessions. I think as most of you know, we presented many of our chapters to the council over the last month. I think we did 4 study sessions in a row, so I'll share kind of some information that we received from them and some other items with you all. Is everybody able to see the presentation? Okay. So as I mentioned, over the course of the last month, starting November 7th and ending last Monday on the 28th, we shared a number of chapters with our city council. And this presentation is really just to go over some of the feedback that we received from them, and then to kind of get some feedback from you all on any of these items. So I'll just go chapter by chapter. On the first chapter, the general provisions, most of the discussion hinged around the limited expansion of non-conforming residential uses. I think, as most of us will recall, we've had some conversations about, duplexes in some of the R1 districts and their inability right now to really do much of anything other than exist. And we've had some citizens that have reached out and wanted the ability to maybe, do some small expansions, but nothing outside of what could have been built if they were to scrape and start over with just a single family use. So there was some continued discussion on looking into the expansion of that, updating some of our intent sections to ensure that we're preserving what our housing assessment group calls naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. And then to just ensure that the information that we provide regarding our boards and commissions really aligns with what's stated in our city charter. On chapter 2, which was our procedures, currently our consultants are incorporating some current site-specific standards or site plan-specific plan standards and doing some revisions to our PUD sections. They feel like it might help offer a little bit more flexibility where needed. And then one of the items that we heard from a council member was to look at lowering the size threshold for rezoning and PUD applications. I believe he felt like right now the minimum 1 acre for a PUD was a little bit excessive, and that it might offer more flexibility if we lowered that threshold so that people might be able to take advantage of that process more often. And if anybody has questions, just feel free to raise your hand or stop me at any point during this presentation.
Hey, Brian, I have one quick question. Isn't the intent to kind of go away from PUDs if we have the correct zoning and correct implementation?
It can be, but in a city that's majority infill or almost all infill, some of those things make it a little bit more complicated. Okay. Especially, what the intent of a PUD is really there for, at least in my opinion, is to avoid somebody having to go to the Board of Adjustment for 16 different variances or a number of different variances so that they can get it all done in one shot. But also to provide, they generally are providing something that they wouldn't be able to get through general use zoning, as far as mixed use or some type of development that they couldn't necessarily get through that.
Okay.
Brian?
Yeah.
I just want to ask a question about one of your comments. Does that happen frequently, that there's maybe up to 16 different variances for one property?
That was just a number I threw out. That's why.
Oh, okay.
I didn't mean to throw out that high of a number, but just
okay.
I don't know that we've taken a case recently where we've had more than one request for a variance to the Board of Adjustment. They're generally just one at a time. But in some of the cities I've worked in, the PUDs have had a number of variances associated with them. So.
Okay. Well, I'm not to say that couldn't happen in the future too. So, okay, sure. Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I can't remember seeing more than 1 or 2 at a time.
Chapter 3, we really did not hear about any major revisions currently. So that's the community design and subdivision standards. Chapter 5, this was probably our largest discussion topic as it revolved around housing. This one meeting lasted about three and a half hours. We presented the housing needs assessment to the council, and then, sat around and talked about, what can we do to kind of implement items out of the housing needs assessment, and then what can we do as a city to look at how we approach residential development and our standards. Some of the items that were touched on were discussions regarding allowing 2 ADUs all the way down to our 6,000 square foot lots. And I do apologize, my kids are upstairs probably screaming if you hear that. Right now, I think we allow them, or the code draft allows them in 9,000 and 7,200 square foot lots. And the council discussion was to lower that to go all the way down to 6,000 square foot lots. But also to look at a mix of attached and detached ADUs. Maybe on some of the smaller lot scenarios, it might be more appropriate to maybe have the option of getting up to 2, but require one to be an attached unit, like a basement unit, or at the rear of the house, and then the other one be detached. They had some discussion regarding our driveways. I think the consultant, Chris, still discussed requirements of having alley loaded driveways for lots that have adjacency to an alley. And the council's discussions kind of wanted more flexibility so that people had the option of either an alley or getting access from the street. And then an item that came out of our affordable housing options was reducing the height requirements in MUR 3B from 60 feet to 40 feet as a maximum height standard, but looking at allowing a height bonus if there's an affordability option provided in the development. And then an item that I think will probably come back to this committee at least one more time will be our bulk plane. We tried to present a much more simplified bulk plane that's kind of in line with what we do now, but with some different options. And the council suggested that we continue to go back and kind of revise and look at how we work through our bulk plane issues. And maybe it's kind of a tiered approach in which we do one type of bulk plane for, single family homes and duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, and look at a different type of bulk plane for more of our 5-unit and above types of development. And then there was a lot of discussion about our affordability options. And if you haven't watched the council meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion regarding providing additional maps so that council can get a better understanding of where these options might occur and how they might be best to be addressed. Does anybody have any questions on this slide?
And this is Nancy. I just want to apologize to Kate Townley. I was having issues, so that's why you were sitting out there for a while. So sorry it took you a while to get in. Carl has his hand up. He has a question.
There's a lot of talk about affordable housing. What is the requirement to be classified as affordable housing? Do you know what that is right now?
In our city, we don't have any regulations regarding affordable housing in our zoning code. So right now there's some discussions about different AMI levels and trying to ping in which one is best for our community. If y'all would like, we can reach out to our housing needs assessment consultants and see if they can come give a presentation to you all as well on kind of where that study has been. But we'll also go ahead and send a link to that city council meeting out to everyone so that you can go watch that presentation. They gave kind of a presentation of the final draft of the study on November 28th.
All right, good, thanks.
Andy?
I was going to ask a question about whether that affordable housing consultant was looking at this question of 60 feet to 40 or 40 feet to 60 feet and whether that would actually be feasible to provide affordable housing for. Would that be enough of an incentive, I guess? Are they looking at that?
Yes, so our housing needs assessment consultant is working with the Code Next team to make sure that whatever types of options or bonuses we plug in, they did their own feasibility study, which we can get that information to you guys as well. to make sure that whatever options we put in the code are actually going to work. The council is still kind of discussing whether we go with the, the feasibility or the incentive-based program, or we go with an inclusionary-based program. So, that's still up in the air. But yeah, the consultants have been working very closely together to make sure that whatever is prescribed or recommended in the assessment is something that we can actually do, and their feasibility studies show that it would actually work. So we'll kind of get back into that a little bit with the parking discussion as well.
Thanks.
So chapter 6, we didn't have any major revisions identified, which is the non-residential development and design standards. Chapter 7, we did. Again, there was a lot of discussion around parking, whether how they had reduced parking was going to be enough. Our consultants, our housing needs assessment consultants kind of, stated that, and our consultants for the UDC talked about the ability to reduce parking overall. But if you're using it as an incentive for affordable housing, you still have to, it has to be an incentive. So there still needs to be somewhat of a higher number for our base parking rates. So, but they're still looking at, with direction from council, looking at the ability to maybe reduce that a little bit more from what they've proposed in our draft. But you'll see that they're talking about doing some pretty drastic reductions, depending on whether you're located near a transit stop, which are mainly just our 2 rail transit stops, or if you're in one of our affordable rate tiers. The other topics that we discussed, again, were keeping similar rates to what we have with subtle and slight refinements, generally lowering those, but using and looking at more generous, but much more clearly defined credits and reductions. We had a call from someone with a development on Broadway that has been following kind of the UDC process, and she had some questions related to how they would apply to her. And the way the draft was written, she identified some kind of holes that we need to fix with the draft. So we're working on that. Michelle, do you have a question?
Yes, on the previous slide, can you define those 3 tiers?
Yeah, let me get my book out. Sorry.
The way I read this slide is that affordable rate tier 2, then if the parking requirement is 1 per unit, you could get 66% of that parking per unit. Is that kind of what way that equation works?
So you would be able to reduce, the way it reads is you would only have to park, or you'd be able to reduce a transit rate. You'd only have to park 75% of your rate. An affordable tier 2, you'd have to park at least 66% of your, if you had to have 100 spaces, your minimum would be 66.
Right.
Tier 3, your 100 spaces would be 50. And then affordable rate tier 4 are majority intended for products that are, if you're thinking about the competitive tax credit projects or things that come in that are 100% affordable, that would be doing like a PUD, that they'd be able to negotiate their tax or their parking rather than having a fixed rate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Colin?
And did I hear you say that council would like to see the rates remain higher as the base level? And then these reductions would happen from that? Or are they saying they would like to keep them the way they're proposed and then these additional cuts below that?
There are some that they want to keep similar to what we have, but to look at refining them, looking at different studies that we have available to us, such as the Dr. Cog TOD studies and other things that we have that identify different rates. But to make the affordability incentive feasible, you still have to have those a little bit higher so that there is that incentive to reduce through the affordability, if that's an incentive-based program that we do. But that is still all up in the air. We're all all open for discussion currently on which direction that we go. But yes, they have talked about lowering the base rate. Not substantially. Some have mentioned substantially, some have mentioned different. So it's a process for us. So we're looking back at some studies. Brooke has provided additional studies to our consultant to go through.
So Kate Townley and then Aaron.
Yeah, I would just be curious, like if council or the housing consultant is looking at kind of the financing side of this and whether it would really pencil out, like in terms of it's not easy to get the tax credits to build affordable housing. So is it going to be an issue to not lower the parking because it's not going to be worth it to get that bonus? Like in many ways, I think it would be better to just reduce the parking and figure out, unless we know that that amount of parking is enough to really make it pencil out for an affordable housing project. Otherwise, I'm worried we're just going to have a bunch of market rate housing with a ton of parking. That doesn't get us, I think, to the vision that we're looking for.
And I think that was a conversation that I believe one of the council members had. But yes, again, our housing needs assessment, and I'll make sure we get that information to you all. They did do feasibility studies that looked at, parking and return on investment to make sure that these are feasible, to make sure that what we're looking at are feasible rates to make this work.
So
Aaron?
Aaron. Oops.
Yeah, I would just like to hear a little bit more about why the transit area was just reduced to the rail stations. I mean, that really leaves out the Hampton and Broadway corridors.
The difficulty, and we talked about doing bus stops. However, if we identify the specific locations currently, bus stops can change. It's less likely that a large transit route will change, but that discussion did come up as well, about going back and taking a look at that. So we are continuing that discussion on how we might approach that, whether it's identifying the bus routes or whether we look at just like identifying corridors, things like that.
Judy. Brian, I'll let you call on him.
No problem.
So I just have a question related to what Kate was talking about. When I was on the housing authority, all of the tax credit people came through the housing authority specifically to ask for their support because their support was necessary in their application for tax credits. So I think that I would assume that council has already talked to them, but they know the minutia of exactly what is going to be required to apply for those tax credit developments. And I mean, they're doing their own development. I haven't followed up with them in quite a while, but I mean, I feel like we have experts sitting right in our city, why we're not discussing with them what tax credit people need in order to do projects in Englewood. And because of our lack of developable land often, there isn't anywhere for them to even, it may be a moot point, I guess do we even need to beat this dead horse if it's not even feasible because there's really no land left that a tax credit developer could benefit from? I don't know, but they're the experts and they spend, hours discussing tax credit development. I just hope we're not leaving the people who are going to be approached about this out of the discussion. So that's just my comment.
Joe?
I just had one quick comment that at the beginning of COVID, RTD got rid of the C line, the light rail line that goes right down from Englewood down to Union Station. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been reinstated. So your comment about, you're right. Generally, bus lines and things like that don't change much, but that was a huge one for Englewood that needs to be considered.
Thank you. And then one of the other items that was talked about, or two other items, one was removing parking requirements for accessory dwelling units. I think the discussion centered around, this is kind of a small requirement to be removed that might make them a little bit more feasible to be constructed. Because lots are limited in their coverage. And another item that was discussed and wants to continue to look at is something this group has talked about quite a bit was requiring electronic vehicle parking requirements. And then looking at that as it would relate to affordability. You know, maybe is there an incentive where if we have it as a requirement, maybe not requiring it for affordable housing options, or, you know, that'll be something that we continue to look at and continue to work with through our building code department as they're looking through their update to their codes. Chapter 8, the biggest takeaways that we got on the landscape design. One, that we shouldn't limit a landscape allowance. And that one centered around an individual ability, if they chose to have 100% Kentucky bluegrass or something that did require a lot of water, that we wouldn't necessarily restrict them from doing that. Although we may require or place incentives on doing something alternative that requires less water, we shouldn't necessarily restrict somebody from wanting to do something that may require a little bit more. Another item that was talked about was looking into requirements that we can include regarding tree preservation. So whether that's, you know, in some cities I've been in, it's been a percentage that you would have to preserve when you come in and redevelop a site, or if it's something that if you remove a certain tree of a certain size, you have to install something that adds up to the same caliber inches on site, or something of that nature. I don't know that we've gotten into the meat of that one, but that was one of the items that was discussed on chapter 8. And then chapter 10, these are the floodplain regulations. We don't have any major renovations at this time, but our consultant is incorporating the comments that our public works department has made. So essentially chapter 10 was coming straight out of our existing code, and our public works department went through and identified some comments that would help in their reviews and their process, and our consultant is incorporating them. Otherwise, we don't have any other significant changes with that. And then as far as our upcoming meeting tonight, was mainly just to recap what we talked about as city council. And then the December 21st, I don't think I have the right day. Is that the 21st? Is that right?
I don't think so. Let me check.
I think it should be the 20th. but I
20th.
don't know even.
Sorry, then December 20th. We'll bring chapter 4, which is our zoning districts, which I think also has another big topic, which are the requirements around ADUs. That's one of the items in that very large chapter. Our intention was to bring that one along with chapter 5. However, Chris's team wasn't able to complete it in enough time to get you more than a week, or at least a week, to read through it. So we didn't want to log that one in or throw that one in and only give you a day or two, a couple days to review. And that one will come with chapter 13, which is our definitions chapter. And then in January 2023, we'll look at bringing in the chapter or regulations regarding historic preservation. And then we are scheduling a meeting with our Historic Preservation Commission on, that's the meeting on the 21st, December 21st. We're going to meet with them to go over the regulations that they've kind of drafted for their group to be included in the UDC. But again, we're working on some additional public outreach, and our adoption schedule has yet to be determined. Honestly, I think there's going to be more discussion with our council. Once we get through chapter 4 and 13 with you all, we'll take that likely as another study session item to them. And then, you know, from there, we're kind of in a wait and see pattern as to how the adoption schedule is going to shake out once Chris's team goes back and reworks the draft based on, you know, council's guidance and some of their items that they've identified. Judy?
So when you're talking about the adoption schedule, is that what you and I spoke about when we met? About how much time the full planning commission is gonna have to go through and discuss all of these items?
Yep.
That the steering committee isn't, I mean, we still haven't been in front of the full planning and zoning commission with this
Right.
stuff. So is that part of that adoption schedule? That's not just public hearing stuff, correct?
Yeah. So that would be, you know, how much time, how far in advance we get the items, the documents to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Whether we do a study session outside of that to go through with the commission and then do public, we haven't scheduled all that yet. Because we're still going through our draft process. So once we get more closer to a finalized document, I know y'all probably are tired of me saying that, but once we get closer to a final document, we'll start mapping out the adoption process. Kate?
I had a question back at the landscape requirements
Yep.
or the idea of providing incentives to deter people from doing full Kentucky bluegrass or something like that. Are there examples of incentives or things that would be available to like a single family owner or, property through the land use code?
No, what we talked about was doing, reducing your requirement. If you have the square footage requirement, you could reduce it using other items. One of the things that was presented to council last night, which is outside of the UDC, but kind of ties back into what we do, is part of a turf replacement program, which would allow, and I don't want to go into too much detail because this comes from our sustainability group, but it would allow incentive for someone to remove that type of turf and to plant lower water use plants or other items. So our project works with a bunch of other projects that are going on at the same time. So.
And I would just say, I mean, I think it's great to have a program to be able to replace, the turf and things like that. But I think looking forward, I don't see why it would make sense to still allow that much. I think we still have to look forward and then have opportunities for people who already have, established home here to be able to replace. And I like the idea that there's different programs working together, but just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I think I agree with Kate. I think there needs to be some more than just a benefit to not have as much bluegrass. I would disagree with council in that on that topic, that we should have some restrictions in some way, shape, or form. I don't know that it has to be full restrictions, but something that limits the just pure turf grass, and just as a topic for another day on a conversation, but that's my thought.
Brenda?
Hi, yeah, this is more just my comment. I watched the city council, some of the study sessions, not all of them, where these issues were discussed, specifically the parking and the grass. And it's really interesting to see kind of both sides represented. There are just people in council in our town that think the market should make these decisions versus government restrictions. So the idea of the Kentucky bluegrass, the idea is that water is so expensive that therein lies the incentive not to put in a whole field of Kentucky bluegrass. And I'm not going to tell you which way I lean. I'm kind of a moderate, right in between. But the same conversation kind of took place with parking too. I believe it was Steve Ward who said that we don't require them to put gas stations in their apartments. Why would we require them to put in electric charging stations? So I'm just telling y'all that go back and watch some of the city council study sessions for an idea of how these stuff all landed and what our chances are for getting anything, what we can move and what we can't. That's all.
And on Brenda's comment, we'll be happy to forward you all the links to all of those council meetings, so that you can go back and watch them at your leisure or any other time. Aaron?
Yeah, just wanted to add maybe a little more weight to Colin and Kate's side of the scale of we definitely do not want to, or I would promote for not allowing that kind of waste of water. Yes, it is expensive, but it's also very, very scarce.
And that was all I had for tonight. So if there's any other questions, I see Brooke's hand up now. Brooke, did you have a comment? We'll come back to him. Brenda, did you have another comment?
No, I meant to lower my hand. Thank you, sorry.
Can you hear me now or no?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to mention on that last slide, Brian, I saw that as a December 21st meeting. Is that a Wednesday? For the steering committee?
Yeah, no. I touched on that. It's December 20th. I
Okay,
accidentally
sorry.
put the date for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. That's the next day.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
So I'll
And
fix
then-
that before we put the presentation online.
Okay, and then I don't know if you can go back to the tiered affordability related to parking slide. That might be back a few. I just wanted to chime in on one thing there. Do you think you can find that?
There you go.
Okay. So I just wanted to anecdotally put out there, you've got your basic rate, which would not have anything to do with transit or affordability. And I think that bullet point is tying our parking ratios a little bit more to not just anything 2 bedrooms or less is 1.5 spaces per unit plus a little bit of guest parking, and I'm talking generally about multi in my point here about multifamily housing. Currently our basic rate is 1.7 spaces per unit. Whether you're a studio, whether you're 2 bedrooms, it's basically 1.7 spaces per unit. So the basic rate would be slightly reduced to kind of create a more detailed breakdown of 1 bedroom versus 2 bedroom and so on. Then of course you have the transit rate, which is 75% of the basic rate, and as Brian said, that's focused around light rail stations basically. But the affordable rate tier 2 is approximately 66% of the basic rate, and that can apply anywhere. So if you take 66% of 1.75 spaces per unit, that takes it down to a little bit over 1 space per unit, and so you save about 0.58 spaces per unit. And structured parking costs typically somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per unit. I'm sorry, per parking space, $20,000 to $30,000 per parking space, kind of depending on the structured parking, whether it's below grade, above grade. But so taking that, $20,000 to $30,000 per parking space, let's just take the middle of that. And if you take that times 25,000, you take the middle of that, and if you're saving 0.58 spaces per unit, for instance, we've got an apartment building that is over 100 units. Just do 100 units. 100 units times 0.58 times 25,000, you're saving almost $1.5 million. So it's fairly significant, to the point of that's why these developers, they'd love it if they could get it down to 1.25 spaces per unit or 1 space per unit. So I do, my whole point in bringing this up is that I do think these affordable rates for whether it's tier 2, 3, or 4 can be very effective and could incentivize developers to build something affordable. Conversely, if to use the term, if you've already sort of given away the farm, they're just going to build market rate, certainly with less parking, but yeah, it's going to be market rate. It's not going to weigh in on the affordability factor other than their cost to build the project, which is legitimate, but you know, that could be between them being able to build a project or not, or it could just increase their profit margins. Who knows? Anyways, that's all.
Thanks, Brooke. Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just trying to make sense of how this is tiered because so it's supposed to be the parking rate is going down as we go down the slide, like they're getting more away, they're having to provide less. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, but
Okay.
what's hard is I don't have the table in front of you, and that's my fault. I had to put this presentation together. As you go down the scale, your level of affordability required to build that project or fit into that tier goes up. So level 4, affordable rate tier 4, is 100% below 120% AMI. These are the proposed level. Tier 3 is 15% of units below 80% AMI, or 25% below 60% AMI, or 50% below 80% AMI. So there's a list, and I'll make sure that I'll give that information whenever we send the presentations out to you guys. We can include that table that talks about the affordability and what they'd have to do to get those bonuses.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds great.
Kate?
Sorry, one last thing. It would be great with that, if possible, to not just have it per unit, but maybe per bedroom. And that's just so we don't have only efficiency apartments or efficiency units that are affordable. Enough for a family, if that's possible to look at it that way.
Do you mean like that we'd have bedroom requirements?
More so if you're looking at a project and if you add, 10 units that are affordable, then you get like your parking bonus or your height density or whatever it is. But I think we also need to consider what's the makeup of those types of units. Are they only efficiency or studio units? And is that serving, is that going to be enough for the needs that we have? Whereas can we somehow have a mix of efficiency, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, things like that?
Got it. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? If not, that's all I have for tonight. And I'll give Planning and Zoning Commission about 12 minutes before our next meeting. With everybody else, thank you. We'll try to get chapters 4 to a little bit earlier next week.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.